What if the people who were supposed to love you most tried to steal everything you had? What if they came with moving trucks and fake smiles, expecting you to roll over, but you had a secret weapon even they didn't see coming? They say family is forever. But my family? They wanted to evict me from the home I inherited, the only place I ever felt truly loved, and they gave me just 2 days to disappear. They thought they'd won, but I'd been waiting for this moment my entire life. And I was about to turn their eviction day into their worst nightmare. My name is Piper Young, and for 22 excruciating days, I have been watching the driveway, waiting for their black SUV to pull up. I still remember that Tuesday morning like it was yesterday. The fog clung to the ancient cedars, and the air smelled of salt and old wood. This estate, almost $1 million, with its wraparound porch and the endless view of Harbor Hollow, to them, it was just prime real estate. To me, it was the only place in the world where the floorboards didn't feel like eggshells. I was 28, fresh out of grad school with a master's degree they didn't care about, and I was about to play the most difficult role of my life, the defeated daughter. I didn't argue when my mother, Elaine, smiled like a shark and told me to be out by Friday. I just nodded, watching my sister Tessa clutch her fake legal papers like a victory trophy. They had no idea that I had legally secured this entire estate right after graduation. No idea at all. I walked downstairs, not rushing. The house was silent, a thick, comforting quiet that only old places built with solid oak and plaster walls can have. They burst in without knocking, a perfectly choreographed invasion. Elaine, my mother, led the charge, her beige cashmere cardigan screaming old money. Behind her, my father, Grant, checked his phone, bringing in a gust of cold, damp air. And between them, Tessa, my younger sister. Radiant, of course. Always radiant. Her eyes swept the foyer, not looking at me, but at the chandelier, the wainscoting, assessing. Calculating. Piper, my mother said, not a greeting, but an acknowledgement of an obstruction. Mom, I replied, my voice steady. Dad, Tessa. I slumped just enough to suggest defeat, but not enough to look sloppy. I needed them to think I was broken. Elaine ran a finger along the console table, found no dust, and frowned. Then she turned that beaming smile on me, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, the smile of a predator. We need to talk, honey, she cooed. That incredibly soft tone meant someone was about to get fired, or Emil was going back to the kitchen. They didn't wait for my answer. They marched past me into the living room, the one with the huge stone fireplace and the lake view. Grant immediately claimed Grandpa's leather armchair. The leather groaned, and my stomach clenched. A sharp, physical rejection. But I kept my face blank. Tessa, ever the restless one, went straight to the window, turning her back to stare out at the property. So, Grant began, putting away his phone. He clasped his hands, adopting the pose of a benevolent patriarch delivering hard wisdom. We've been discussing the situation, the estate, the future. The situation, I repeated flatly. Yes, Elaine said, hovering near Grant. We know you've been staying here since the funeral, helping clear things out. And we appreciate that, Piper. Truly, you've been very helpful. But, Tessa interjected, spinning around, it is time to move forward. She pulled a thick manila envelope from her designer tote, tapping it against her palm like a weapon. We've gone through the probate details. Mom and Dad have decided to transfer the deed. We expedited the filing. The house is going to be in my name. She said it so casually, like ordering a latte. Grant nodded solemnly. It makes the most sense. Piper, Tessa is getting married next year. She needs a space. You have your life in the city, you're single. You don't need a 5-bedroom estate. It's too much maintenance for one person. Plus, Elaine added, her hand cold on my arm, we think it's best for you to have a fresh start somewhere smaller, more manageable. I looked at her hand, then at Tessa, who watched me with a mixture of pity and triumph. So, Tessa said, dropping the envelope onto the coffee table with a heavy slap. We need you to vacate soon. How soon? I asked, my voice steady. Elaine squeezed my arm. Friday, sweetheart. We have contractors coming on Monday to start renovations. Tessa wants to redo the kitchen completely before the wedding planning starts in earnest. Friday. Today was Tuesday. 72 hours to pack up 28 years of my life, plus 60 years of my grandparents' history. Friday, I said. Yes, Grant's tone hardened. Friday by 5 in the afternoon. We don't want to make this messy, Piper. We handle the papers. It's done. The house is Tessa's. We just want a smooth transition. Tessa stepped closer, her eyes gleaming. I've already scheduled the movers for Saturday morning to bring my things in. So, the space needs to be clear. Totally clear. I don't want to deal with boxes of old junk. Old junk. She called her grandparents' life old junk. The rage that flared in my chest was white hot. But I'd practiced for this. Weeks of rehearsing neutrality in the mirror. If I argued, they'd dig in. If I screamed, they'd call me unstable. If I cried, they'd enjoy it. They wanted to fight. They wanted to crush me, to prove I was the difficult, ungrateful one. I looked at the envelope. I knew it contained a quitclaim deed, prepared by their attorney, assuming the estate was theirs to give. You have the papers signed and notarized? I asked Tessa. She lied, or perhaps she just believed it. It's over, Piper. I took a slow breath, letting my shoulders drop another inch. I looked at the floor, then back up at them. Okay, I said. The word hung in the air. Elaine blinked. Okay, I repeated. I understand. You're right. It's a big house. I can't maintain it alone. The tension in the room snapped. Grant sat back, disappointed he didn't get to use his booming father voice. Elaine looked confused, her script useless now. Tessa just looked suspicious. You're not going to make a scene? Tessa narrowed her eyes. Why would I? I walked to the mantel and picked up a small ceramic bird my grandmother had painted. If the papers are signed, the papers are signed. I have to be realistic, right? Exactly. Grant exhaled loudly. I'm glad you're finally being mature about this, Piper. Finally, I said, placing the bird back gently. I'll start packing today. I can be out by Friday. No problem. Elaine clapped her hands, a sharp sound of delight. Oh, wonderful. I knew you'd understand. We can help you find a nice apartment in the city. Maybe something studio-sized. I'll handle my own living arrangements, I said. But thank you. Tessa walked to the fireplace, running her hand along the stone. I'm going to paint this white, she murmured. This natural stone is so dated, and the floors need to be sanded down. They're too dark. A spasm of pain in my chest. Grandpa had laid those stones himself, but I forced a tight smile. It'll look very modern, I said. It'll look expensive, Tessa corrected. She turned to me. I need the keys now. I need to give a set to the contractor. I have a spare set in the kitchen, I said. I'll get them for you. I walked into the kitchen, away from their eyes. I gripped the granite counter, knuckles white, and counted to 10. 1, 2, 3. The key to the back door, the one that stuck if you didn't jiggle it right. I brought it back. Here, I said. She snatched it without a thank you. Great. I'll be back on Friday at 5 to do the final walkthrough. If there's anything left here, the movers are instructed to trash it. Understood, I said. Come on, Grant said, standing. Lunch reservation at the club. Piper, you have a lot of work to do. I do, I said, holding the door open for them. I watched my mother button her coat, my father check his watch. Tessa tucked the folder under her arm, walking out with the swagger of a queen who just conquered a new kingdom. See you Friday, Tessa threw over her shoulder. Drive safe, I replied, a small, dark smile playing on my lips. I stood there and watched them get into the SUV. Watched them back out, crushing the hydrangeas Grandma had planted. Watched them disappear into the fog. They were celebrating, I knew it, toasting their cleverness, laughing about how easy I was, how broken. They didn't ask the right questions. They didn't ask why I wasn't at my graduation party, or where I was the Tuesday after the ceremony, or why the mail had stopped coming to the house 10 days ago. If they had looked closely at Tessa's papers, they might have noticed the deed was based on a superseded will. But they didn't look. They never looked. They just assumed that because they were loud, because they were aggressive, they were right. I closed the heavy oak door. Didn't lock it. Not yet. I leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. The house was silent again, but the silence had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was vibrating. I pulled out my phone, my hands perfectly steady. I opened an encrypted messaging app, scrolled to a contact simply labeled Verify. I typed, "They have started. Please arrive on schedule." I watched the delivered checkmark, then the read. I stood up, brushed dust off my jeans, and walked to the front door. My hand on the brass knob, cold and solid, worn smooth by 60 years of Grandpa's hand, then mine. My family thought this door was the only thing separating them from ownership. They didn't realize the lock wasn't the barrier. I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction settle in my gut. They were coming back in 48 hours with trucks, contractors, dreams of white-painted stone. They were coming to claim a prize. They had no idea I'd already turned this entire house into a vault, and I was the only one who knew the combination. The silence after they left wasn't empty. In this house, silence had texture. It had weight. I walked into the kitchen, the beating heart of the estate. The air still smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon oil. Outside the bay window, the waters of Harbor Hollow lapped against the wall, a rhythmic sloshing like a giant animal breathing. I closed my eyes and listened. This sound had put me to sleep every summer since I was 4. To my parents, it was just dampness. To Tessa, a selfie backdrop. To me, it was the only lullaby I had ever known. I made myself tea in Grandpa Walter's chipped blue mug. As the steam hit my face, the adrenaline faded, replaced by deep, aching nostalgia. Growing up, love in the Young family was a finite resource, a pie too small for 4. Tessa always got the biggest slice. I didn't hate her for it then. It's hard to hate the sun for shining, even if it burns you. I just learned to stand in the shade. Piper is the independent one. That's the label Elaine and Grant slapped on me before I could tie my shoes. Piper is fine, Mom would say at dinner parties, waving a hand dismissively while Tessa performed. Piper is self-sufficient. She doesn't need fussing over. It sounded like a compliment, but even at 7, I knew it was a dismissal. Don't ask for help. Don't have needs. Don't be inconvenient. Independence, I learned, is just a fancy word for neglect rebranded as a virtue. But here, at Harbor Hollow, the rules were different. Grandma June didn't care about independence. She cared if you'd eaten, if you were warm. I remembered running away here at 16, AB on a chemistry test creating such suffocating disappointment at home I couldn't breathe. Grandpa Walter opened the door at midnight. He didn't ask why. He just looked at my tear-streaked face, stepped aside, and said, "The kettle is on." That night, we sat on the back porch, listening to the wind chimes. Heavy copper tubes, Walter cut himself. They didn't tinkle. They resonated, singing in low, mournful tones that vibrated through my chest. "You're trying too hard to be what they want," Walter told me, his voice rough like tree bark. "You can't carve a statue out of water, Piper. Stop trying to hold her shape." For 48 hours, I wasn't the disappointment. I was just Piper, a girl loved simply because she existed. That was the magic of this house. The only place I didn't have to earn my space. But houses, like people, get old. And people, unlike houses, cannot be renovated indefinitely. The decline started 5 years ago. Small things first. June forgetting the stove. Walter losing his balance. Phone calls to my parents became frequent, but their visits did not. "We're so swamped with the business," Grant would say, voice tight with fake regret. "Can you drive down this weekend, Piper? Check on them. You're so good with them." So I went. Every weekend. Then every 3 days. Then, during my last 2 years of my master's, I moved my entire life into the guest room downstairs, so I could be there every night. I became the keeper of the decline. I learned the difference between confused wandering and dangerous exit-seeking. I labeled cupboards for June, sat with Walter when his lungs rattled like dry leaves, holding his hand until the morphine kicked in. I managed the money, too. That was the part my parents never asked about, because asking would have required them to get involved. Walter handed me the checkbook 3 years ago, his hand shaking too much to sign. "You do it, Pip," he whispered. "You've got a good head." I paid the property taxes, the insurance, hired landscapers. I balanced every single ledger. I knew exactly how much money was in the retirement accounts, and how fast the medical bills were draining it. And Elaine, Grant, and Tessa? They came for Thanksgiving. They came for Christmas, if they didn't have a better offer in the Caribbean. I remember 6 months before June passed. Tessa drove down in her new convertible. She walked in, wrinkling her nose at the smell of antiseptic and old age I couldn't scrub out of the carpets. "God, it's depressing in here," she said, dropping her bag on the table I'd just wiped. She looked at me, in oversized sweatpants and no makeup, dark circles under my eyes. "You look terrible, Piper. You really need to take better care of yourself. It's not healthy to bury yourself alive here." Elaine walked around the living room, touching antiques, not with affection, but like an auctioneer. "That grandfather clock is an original, isn't it?" she asked. "I wonder what that would fetch in the city." "Mom, Grandma's sleeping in the next room," I hissed, angry tears stinging my eyes. "I'm just being practical," she sniffed. "Jim won't need a clock forever. We have to think about the estate." The estate. That was all they saw. Not the home. Not the vessel of memory. They saw a portfolio asset, a line item on a spreadsheet. When June died, they cried beautifully at the funeral. Tessa gave a eulogy about baking cookies with Nana that was entirely fictional, but the crowd ate it up. They patted Grant on the back, told Elaine she was so strong. I stood in the back, dry-eyed, because I'd done my grieving changing bed sheets and spoon-feeding broth. After June was gone, Walter faded fast. It's a cliché, but true. He didn't want to be here without her. But in those final months, his mind, which had been foggy for a year, suddenly cleared. Terminal lucidity, the doctors called it. 2 weeks before he died, just 5 weeks ago, Walter called me to his bedside. The room was dark, lit only by the street lamp. "Piper," he rasped. "I'm here, Grandpa," I said. He gripped my hand, surprisingly strong. A ghost of the carpenter he used to be. "They're coming," he said. I thought he meant doctors or angels. "Who's coming?" "The vultures," he said, looking me dead in the eye, his blue eyes sharp and terrifyingly aware. "Your parents, Tessa, they're waiting for the clock to stop, so they can strip the gears." A chill went down my spine. I hadn't told him about Elaine's comments. "They think I'm asleep," Walter whispered. "They talk over me. Talk about selling the lot, subdividing the land. They think because I'm old, I'm deaf. I won't let them hurt the house. I promised." He shook his head violently. "No, don't fight them with sentiment. You can't fight greedy people with feelings, Piper. They don't speak that language. You have to fight them with paper." He pulled me closer. I signed the papers, the new ones. "The lawyer, the one who isn't your father's golf buddy. You remember?" I nodded. "Miles. The estate attorney Walter had insisted on seeing privately 6 months ago. I'd driven him there, thinking it was routine. "Everything is arranged," Walter said, his voice dropping to a wheeze. "But you have to trigger it. It's a dormant mechanism. You have to be the one to turn the key. I left it all to the trust. And I made you the trustee. But they don't know. They think the old will from 10 years ago is the only one. I sat frozen. The old will left everything to Grant and Elaine, assuming they'd care for us. Why didn't you tell them? I asked. Because they would have put me in a home, he said simply. Declared me incompetent, taken power of attorney. I had to play the fool to keep my freedom. He coughed, a terrible wet sound. When he settled back, he looked exhausted, the light fading from his eyes. Listen to me, Piper. When I go, they will descend. They will try to bully you, make you feel small. They will use your own politeness against you. I know, I said. Don't wait, he said. Don't wait for them to ask permission. If you wait for permission, you've already lost. That was the last coherent conversation we ever had. He slipped into a coma the next day and passed away 3 days later. Standing in the kitchen now, holding the cold mug of tea, I felt the truth of his words settle in my gut like a stone. He was right. The last 3 weeks, since the funeral, had been a masterclass in gaslighting. Elaine asking for keys, just to water the plants, when I was already living here. Grant asking for social security numbers, for the death certificate, when the funeral home had already handled it. Tessa measuring windows for curtains. They weren't grieving. They were appraising. They looked at this house and saw $1 million. A renovation project. A summer home to show off. I looked at the walls, at the pencil marks on the doorframe, measuring my height from 3 to 18. The scratches on the floor where Walter's dog paced. The spot by the window where June watched birds. This wasn't an asset. This was a vessel of memory. And they were going to gut it. I rinsed the mug. My reflection in the dark window looked back. I didn't look like the independent Piper anymore. I looked like Walter's granddaughter. I thought about the timeline. I'd followed Walter's instructions perfectly. I'd met with Miles immediately after graduation, a ceremony my parents attended for 45 minutes before leaving for a dinner reservation I wasn't invited to. While they ate steak, I signed the trust documents that activated the transfer of the deed upon Walter's death. But I hadn't filed the public notice immediately. Miles advised me to wait, to let them make the first move, so their intent to bypass the true will was documented. Now they had made their move. I walked to the living room and picked up Tessa's envelope. I didn't need to open it. I remembered Walter's voice, don't wait for them to ask permission. I wasn't waiting anymore. I walked to the front door, the same door I'd closed on them an hour ago. I locked the deadbolt. Then I engaged the second lock, the heavy brass slide bolt Walter had installed 40 years ago. It made a solid, final thunk. But that wasn't enough. I went to the hallway closet, pulled out a small toolbox. With steady hands, I began to dismantle the entire handle mechanism. If they wanted to get back in on Friday with their key, they were going to be very disappointed. Because by the time the sun went down tonight, there wouldn't be a keyhole left. I was going to replace every entry lock with biometric smart locks I had bought 2 weeks ago and hidden in the garage. Locks that only responded to my fingerprint. Everything is arranged, Walter had said. You just need to be awake. I was wide awake now. And I was about to give the young family a very rude awakening. I stood in the foyer, the screwdriver still heavy in my hand. The new biometric lock hummed softly, a green light pulsing once before fading into the matte black finish. Done. The physical perimeter was secure. But as I stared at the door, my mind drifted back to the hairline fractures, the small, slippery comments that had foreshadowed today's ambush. I walked back into the kitchen, opened my laptop. While it booted, I replayed the tea summit from 10 days ago. Sunday. Funeral flowers wilted on the sideboard. Elaine and Grant came to check on me, bringing $8 pastries that tasted like cardboard. We're just worried about you, Piper, Elaine had said, pouring tea into Grandpa's delicate china. She didn't ask if I wanted tea, she just poured it. This house, it's a monster to maintain. Have you seen the heating bill for last January? I found it in the study. She'd been snooping, of course. It's high. I replied, neutral. But the insulation helps. Does it? Grant chimed in, leaning against the counter, eating a croissant without a plate, flaking pastry everywhere. We were looking at the property tax assessment. It went up again this year. $12,000, Piper. That's not pocket change for a girl your age. I have savings, I said. Savings burn fast, Grant said, shaking his head with a grimace that was supposed to be paternal concern, but looked more like a bank manager denying a loan. And then there are the inheritance tax implications. If we don't handle the transfer correctly, the government's going to take 40%. Do you want that? I don't think it's 40% for direct descendants, I said softly. You're not a tax attorney, honey. Elaine cut me off with a smile that was all teeth. Grant's been talking to his people. They say the best way to protect the asset is to consolidate it, put it in a trust where we're all listed. But Dad and I manage the overhead for safety. Safety. That was their favorite word. Used to disguise control. And what about Tessa? I asked. Elaine sighed dramatically. Tessa is fragile right now. She needs stability. She's been looking at condos, but the market is impossible. We were thinking, just hypothetically, that if we all owned this place, Tessa could use it as a base. It's only fair. Grandpa and Grandma would have wanted everything split equally. Don't you think? Fair. That word triggered a memory, so sharp I almost dropped my tea. Aunt Sarah, 7 years ago, grandsister. Sarah lent my father $50,000 for a short-term business issue. When she needed it back for her daughter's tuition, Grant and Elaine invited her to dinner, but didn't bring a check. They brought a narrative. They told the rest of the family Sarah was predatory, trying to bankrupt her own brother. They spun the story until Sarah was the villain. She never got the money back. Just a reputation for being greedy. I looked at my parents in that kitchen 10 days ago and saw the same script being written for me. If I fought them on fairness, I would become the greedy granddaughter. So, I decided to play the role they expected. The overwhelmed, soft-spoken girl, good at following orders, bad at math. I suppose you're right, I said, lowering my eyes. It's a lot of money. I don't know if I can handle the taxes alone. I saw the tension leave Grant's shoulders. Saw Elaine exchange a quick, victorious glance with him. They thought they had me. They thought I was folding. Exactly, Grant said, voice rich with relief. We just want to help you, Piper. We'll get the paperwork drawn up. You won't have to worry about a thing. That was 10 days ago. Then came Tessa's visit, 4 days later. She didn't bring pastries. She brought a tape measure, though she tried to hide it. She claimed she was looking for a specific childhood photo album to scan for a project. I let her in. I watched her. She didn't look for albums. She walked through the rooms with the cold, calculating gaze of a flipper. Opened the pantry, checked for dry rot, flushed toilets to check pressure. Stood in the living room, spinning slowly, not taking in memories, but calculating square footage. This wall, she'd said, tapping the partition between the kitchen and dining room. It's load-bearing, isn't it? I think so, I said. Grandpa built it to support the upper deck. Pity, Tessa muttered. It really closes off the flow. An open concept would add at least $50,000 to the value. She caught herself, flashed a bright, fake smile. I mean, if we ever decided to sell, which we won't. But it's good to know the equity, right? Right, I said. Later, while she pretended to look through a bookshelf, I saw her pull out her phone, angle it to take a picture of a document I'd left intentionally on the side table, a fake utility bill showing an overdue balance of $3,000. I wanted them to think I was drowning. I wanted them to think the ship was sinking so they would rush to rescue it, and in their haste, make mistakes. Tessa snapped the photo, slipped the phone back into her pocket. You know, Piper, she'd said, dripping with faux sympathy. If you're struggling, you can tell us. Mom says you haven't been working much since graduation. I'm managing. I lied. Sure, she said. But why struggle? We're family. If you just sign the house over to Mom and Dad, you could walk away with a nice little payout, maybe $20,000. You could travel, go to Europe, find yourself. $20,000 for $1 million estate. The insult was so massive it was almost impressive. I'll think about it, I said. But the real twist, the moment I knew war was inevitable, came from a source they didn't account for. Mr. Henderson, the neighbor 2 houses down, retired naval officer, spent his days watching the neighborhood through binoculars. He caught me at the mailbox the day after Tessa's visit. Your sister is a spirited one, Mr. Henderson grunted, leaning over his fence. She has a lot of energy, I agreed. She stopped by my place yesterday, he said. Asked me about the property lines. Wanted to know if I'd have an objection to a construction crew blocking the shared easement road for a few weeks next month. My blood ran cold. Next month? Yeah, Henderson said. She's planning a full gut renovation. Kitchen, bathrooms, new roof. Said she has the permits lined up. She had told the neighbor she was renovating before she even owned the house. She was so confident, so arrogant in her assumption that I would just roll over, she was already scheduling contractors. That was the moment the sadness in me died, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Back in the present, I shook my head, clearing the memories. My laptop screen was loaded. I logged into the secure email server I'd set up with Miles. A new notification. 20 minutes ago, while I was installing the biometric lock. Subject: new filing alert, county clerk. Property ID 00492. My heart hammered. It wasn't from me. Not from Miles. It was an automated alert from the service I'd subscribed to, monitoring legal activity for this address. Document type: quitclaim deed. Grantor: Elaine Young, executive. Grantee: Tessa Young. Status: pending review. I stared at the screen. They had done it. They had actually forged ahead. Filed a deed transferring the property from the estate to Tessa, bypassing me entirely. They thought the old will was valid, that I wouldn't notice until it was too late. They thought the filing would slip through bureaucratic cracks. By the time I realized, the title would be in Tessa's name, and I'd be the one suing to get it back. A process that takes years and thousands. They moved fast, faster than I expected. But then I saw the timestamp on the digital receipt, submitted electronically yesterday afternoon. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Not a happy smile. The smile of a chess player watching their opponent move their queen into a trap. They had just tried to grab smoke. To transfer a house the estate of Walter Young no longer owned. But the fact that they tried, the fact that they submitted a legal document claiming ownership they didn't verify, that was the mistake. That was the overreach. I opened a second window, pulled up the confirmation for my own filing. The one Miles and I had executed quietly, legally, permanently, 3 days after graduation. The one that transferred the title not to a person, but to the Walter and June Young Irrevocable Trust. My phone buzzed again. Not a text. An email from the county clerk's automated system. A follow-up. Alert. Conflict detected. Title clouded. Please contact clerk office immediately. I sat back in the chair. The kitchen was silent, but inside the digital world, alarm bells were starting to ring. They had just walked into the minefield. I picked up my phone and dialed Miles. They filed, I said. I see it. Miles said calm. They just committed fraud, Piper. Maybe not intentionally, if they claim ignorance. But on paper, they just try to sell something they don't own. This is it. This is the leverage. What do I do? Nothing, Miles said. Let them come on Friday. Let them bring the movers. Let them think the filing went through. When they find out it was rejected, I want them to be standing on your porch with an audience. I hung up. I looked at the pending review status on their filing one last time. Bitter. That was the only word for it. They thought they were serving me a defeat, sweet as tea. But they had just swallowed a poison pill. I closed the laptop. The sun was setting over Harbor Hollow. They asked about taxes. They asked about renovations. They asked about fairness. They should have asked who held the keys. To understand why I was standing in a fortified house waiting for a siege, you have to understand where I was 3 weeks ago. The quiet, dusty room where the real war was won before a single shot was fired. It was the Tuesday after the funeral. I'd driven into the city, leaving Harbor Hollow's gray mist for downtown gridlock. I wasn't going to a glass skyscraper, but to a brownstone office that smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Miles Clean had been my grandfather's attorney for 40 years. A man who moved with the slow, deliberate gravity of a tortoise. He didn't speak until he'd considered a sentence from 3 angles. I sat in a leather chair that swallowed me whole. The office was lined with books that looked like they hadn't been opened since the Reagan administration. The complete opposite of Tessa's world of Instagram filters and instant gratification. This room was built on things that lasted. They're already measuring the rooms, Miles, I said. I didn't have to explain who they were. Miles took off his glasses, cleaned them. He looked tired. It's fast, he said. Even for the Young family. That's fast. Mom asked me where the deed was kept. I continued. Dad asked if the insurance policy was up to date. They aren't grieving. They're liquidating. Miles put his glasses back on, looked at me across his mahogany desk. And what did you tell them? I played dumb, I said. Told them I was just the caretaker, didn't know anything about the paperwork. Good. Miles nodded. Ignorance is your best armor right now. He opened a thick file. I saw my grandfather's shaky signature on the top document. A letter of intent, written 6 months ago. The day Walter decided he couldn't trust his own children. Here's the reality, Piper, Miles said, his voice dropping an octave, heavy and serious. The law is a tool, but it's a slow tool. Possession, intimidation, and momentum. Those are fast tools. Your parents and your sister operate on momentum. They believe that if they move fast enough, if they are loud enough, if they simply occupy the space, the law will eventually catch up and rubber stamp their victory. He leaned forward. They will act first. They will move in. They will change the locks. And then they will dare you to spend 5 years and $50,000 in court to get them out. And they know you don't have that kind of money. They're banking on your exhaustion. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. He was describing exactly what was happening. The move out by Friday command wasn't a request. It was a bulldozer. So how do I stop a bulldozer? I asked. You don't stand in front of it, Miles said. You dig a trench, so deep it falls in. He pushed a stack of papers toward me. These weren't standard probate forms. The paper felt heavier. The header was printed in bold, uncompromising font. The Walter and June Young Irrevocable Trust. We talked about this with Walter, Miles said. But we never executed the final transfer of the deed because he was afraid your mother would see the public filing while he was still alive and cause a scene at the hospital. He wanted peace in his final days. I know, I whispered. But now, Miles tapped the paper. We execute it. This document does 3 things. First, it removes the Harbor Hollow estate from the probate process entirely. It's no longer an asset of the estate of Walter Young. It's an asset of the trust. That means your parents, as executors of the will, have no authority over it. None. I traced the letters with my finger. Irrevocable. It sounded permanent, like a stone dropping into a well. Second, Miles continued, it names you as the sole trustee with the right of residency for life. You're not just the owner. You're the steward. You decide who enters. You decide who stays. And the third thing is a safety net, Miles said. He turned the page to a section full of complex clauses. I've drafted this so that any modification to the trust requires the approval of an independent trust protector. That is me. Even if they bully you, even if they guilt trip you, even if they scream at you until you cry and agree to sign the house over to Tessa, you can't. Your signature alone isn't enough to break this trust. I would have to agree, and I will never agree. I looked up at him. He was offering me handcuffs, but they weren't to bind me. They were to strap me to the mast of the ship so the storm couldn't wash me away. They'll hate me, I said. It wasn't a question. They already resent you, Piper, Miles said gently. Because you were there. Because you did the work they didn't want to do. This will just make it official. He handed me a pen. A heavy, black fountain pen. If you sign this, he said, there's no going back. The house belongs to the trust. You can't sell it next year to buy a sports car. You can't mortgage it to go on vacation. It is preserved. It is a fortress. I thought about the sound of the wind chimes. The way the light hit the floorboards. Tessa talking about painting the stone fireplace white. I took the pen. The nib scratched against the paper, a loud, decisive sound in the quiet room. I signed my name once, twice, 3 times. Then the notary, a quiet woman named Brenda, stamped it with a thud that felt like a gavel. Thud. It was done. Now, Miles said, closing the folder. We wait. We have to file this with the county, but these things take time to process. While it's processing, your family is going to try things. They're going to try to file their own papers. They might even hire one of those online deed filing services. Tessa mentioned something like that, I said. She said she has people handling the paperwork. Miles scowled. Predators. There are companies that prey on new heirs. They file quitclaim deeds without doing a proper title search. They take the fee and leave you with a legal mess. If your sister uses one of them, she's going to create a cloud on the title. But because we signed this today, and because the trust is dated effective as of Walter's death per his instructions, our claim is superior. But it will get messy. So what do I do until the dust settles? You act normal, Miles commanded. You go back to the house, you drink their tea, you listen to their insults, and you document everything. He handed me a business card. On the back, a list. 1. Do not argue. 2. Do not reveal the trust exists. 3. Record dates and times of every entry. 4. Save every text message. Why can't I just tell them? I asked. Why can't I just wave this paper in their faces and make them leave? Because if you tell them now, Miles said, they will try to destroy the credibility of the trust before it's fully recorded. They will claim Walter was incompetent. They will claim you manipulated him. They will drag this into court immediately. But if you let them think they have won, if you let them walk up to that door believing they have the advantage, they will overplay their hand. And when they do, we will have them on record, trespassing. So I went back to Harbor Hollow. For 3 weeks, I lived a double life. In the mornings, I was the dutiful, submissive daughter. I nodded when Grant lectured me about financial responsibility. I stepped aside when Tessa walked through the hallway like she was on a runway. I said, okay, when Elaine told me to pack my things. But at night, I was an archivist of their greed. I created a folder on my encrypted drive. The evidence. Screenshots of Tessa's texts. Don't forget to clean out the garage. I need space for the Porsche. Elaine, make sure you leave the antique silver. It's family property, not yours. Grant, I cancel the landscaping contract. I'll hire my own guys once we take possession. Every text was a brick in the wall I was building. I installed audio recorders in the living room. Legal in my state as long as one party, me, consented. I captured Grant admitting he needed to leverage the house for a business loan. I captured Tessa laughing about how she was going to evict the hermit. It was exhausting. It felt like living with a knife pressed against my throat, waiting for permission to breathe. But the hardest part wasn't the fear. It was the heartbreak. Listening to them, really listening to them, stripped away the last layer of childhood denial. I realized they didn't just want the house. They wanted to erase me from it. To them, I wasn't family. I was a squatter. An obstacle to be removed, so their real life could begin. Yesterday, after the confrontation, after they told me to be out by Friday, I called Miles again. They set a deadline, I told him. Friday at 5. They're coming with movers. Friday, Miles repeated. I heard him checking his calendar. Excellent. Excellent. It's the perfect stage. They're escalating to a physical takeover. That means we can meet them with a physical defense. I'm scared, Miles, I admitted, looking at the biometric locks I hadn't installed yet. What if they just break the door down? What if they bring the police? Let them bring the police, Miles said, his voice calm and steely. In fact, I hope they do. The police enforce the law, and the law is on your side. He paused. I'm not coming alone on Friday, Piper. I'm bringing someone with me. Not another lawyer. No. A witness, Miles said. An official from the county process server's office. Someone whose job is to verify the delivery of legal documents and the status of occupancy. A neutral third party. When your father starts screaming and your sister starts crying, this person won't care. They'll just write it down. A witness, I repeated. Exactly, Miles said. We're going to let them walk right up to the trap. Let them think the door is opening for them, and then we're going to show them exactly who holds the keys. I hung up. The memory of that dusty office visit anchored me. I looked at the text history on my phone. Tessa, movers are booked. Hope you're packed. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had signed the paper. I had engaged the trust. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for them to step on the trigger. The strangest thing about a shark attack isn't the bite. It's the water going still right before the strike. In the 48 hours leading up to Friday, my family stopped barking orders. They stopped sending aggressive emails. Instead, they pivoted to a strategy that was infinitely more terrifying. They started being nice. It began Wednesday evening, just a day after I had closed the door on their eviction notice. I was labeling Grandpa's journals, not to pack them, but to organize them for the library I planned to build. The doorbell rang. Not the sharp, demanding ring I was used to. A cheerful, rhythmic, ding-dong-ding. I checked the new camera feed on my phone. Elaine and Tessa stood on the porch, not holding legal papers this time, holding a casserole dish and a bottle of wine. I opened the door, leaving the security chain engaged a fraction too long, just so they'd feel the resistance. Then I slid it back and smiled. My smile was a mirror of theirs. Thin, polite, utterly empty. Surprise! Elaine chirped, wearing an apron over her designer blouse, a costume of domesticity she hadn't worn since I was 6. We thought you might be too busy packing to cook, so we brought dinner. Lasagna, Grandma's recipe. It wasn't Grandma's recipe. I could smell the distinct, sterile aroma of a store-bought gourmet meal. But I stepped back. That's so thoughtful, I said. We're family, Piper, Tessa said, breezing past me. We just want to spend some quality time together before the transition. The transition. Their new word for kicking me out. It sounded like a corporate merger, or a gender reveal party, or a death. We sat in the dining room, the air thick with a performance so elaborate it deserved a stage. Elaine served the lasagna, talking about how much she missed the old days, 4th of July at Harbor Hollow. She conveniently forgot that for the last 10 years, she'd spent every 4th in the Hamptons because the humidity here frizzed her hair. Do you remember when Dad taught you to ride a bike on the driveway? Tessa asked, sipping wine, her eyes scanning my face for a crack in my armor. I do, I said. I fell into the hydrangeas. Exactly. Elaine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Such good memories. That's why we want to keep this house in the family, Piper. To protect those memories. We were worried that if you were here all alone, you might get overwhelmed. You might sell it to strangers. I would never sell, I said softly, staring at my fork. Of course not, Grant said. He'd arrived 10 minutes late, claiming traffic, but I suspected he'd been on a call with his bank. He cut into his lasagna with surgical precision. But life happens. Taxes happen. We just want to take the burden off your shoulders. You understand that, right? This isn't about taking something from you. It's about doing something for you. I chewed slowly. I appreciate the concern. Then came the test. Tessa looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the heavy oak wainscoting. You know, she said, her voice light and teasing. If this place were mine, legally, I mean, I'd probably paint all this wood white, make it look like a beach cottage. Open it up, maybe knock down that wall to the kitchen. She paused, waiting. She wanted me to snap, to scream that Grandpa carved that wood himself. She wanted me to reveal that I cared too much, because if I cared too much, I was unstable. And if I was unstable, I was easy to dismiss. I took a sip of water. White is a very popular color, I said flatly. It bounces the light well. Tessa blinked. She looked disappointed. She'd thrown a dart, and it had hit a wall of marshmallows. Right, she said, recovering. Exactly. Glad you agree. Grant cleared his throat. The pleasantries were over. Now came the extraction. Speaking of the transition, Grant said, leaning forward. We need to make sure the paperwork is clean for the handover on Friday. I was looking for the original property tax binders. The ones from 98 through 2005. Walter was obsessive about keeping them. Do you know where they are? And the safe key, Elaine added, trying to sound casual. The one for the wall safe in the study. I think I left a few pieces of jewelry in there years ago. I should probably get them out before the movers come. She hadn't left jewelry there. The safe contained the original deed to the land, hand-signed in 1945. They wanted the originals. They wanted to erase any paper trail that didn't match their narrative. I looked at them. 3 predators, napkins on their laps, asking me to hand over the knife they intended to stab me with. I widened my eyes, channeling every ounce of the overwhelmed daughter persona. I'm not sure, I stammered. I started moving boxes around last week. Everything is in such a mess. There are piles everywhere. I think I saw the tax binder in the garage, or maybe the attic. The attic! Grant twitched. He hated the attic. Dusty, hot. I'm sorry, I said, dropping my head. I'm just so bad at organizing. You know me, always scatterbrained. It's okay, sweetie, Elaine said through gritted teeth. We can look for them together on Friday. I could go look now, while we have dessert, Tessa suggested. The bulb is out in the attic, I lied. It's pitch black up there. And there are bats. Bats! Tessa recoiled. Huge ones, I said. I'd hate for you to get bitten right before the wedding photos. Tessa sat back down. The immediate threat of a physical search was averted, but I knew I'd only bought time. Later that night, while Elaine pretended to help me wash dishes, which meant she stood by the sink holding a towel while I scrubbed, I walked into the living room to collect the wine glasses. Tessa was on the sofa, her phone illuminated. She didn't hear me approach on the thick rug. I stood behind her for 3 seconds. That's all I needed. She wasn't on Instagram. She wasn't texting her fiancé. She was on a website with a garish yellow banner. Quickinheritance.com. Expedited estate transfers. Title correction. I saw her thumb hovering over a button that said Upload Will. My blood ran cold, then hot. Miles had warned me. These were the document mills. Automated legal services that didn't ask questions, didn't verify mental capacity, didn't check for conflicting trusts. They just took a PDF and a credit card and generated a filing. Is the Wi-Fi working okay? I asked loudly. Tessa jumped so hard she almost dropped the phone, slamming the screen against her chest, her eyes wide with guilt. Jesus, Piper, she hissed. Don't sneak up on people. Sorry, I said. Just wanted to get your glass. I was just checking work emails, she lied, her face flushing pink. You work too hard, I said. I took the glass and walked back to the kitchen, my hands shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. They weren't just greedy. They were reckless. Tessa was about to feed my grandfather's legacy into a meat grinder of automated law just to save a few weeks of probate. That was the moment I decided the passive defense wasn't enough. The next morning, Thursday, I ramped up physical security. I'd already installed the biometric deadbolts, but kept them in dummy mode, accepting the old keys. I didn't want to lock them out completely until the trap was sprung. But now I needed eyes. I spent the morning installing micro cameras, not in obvious places. One inside the hollowed-out spine of a book on the hallway shelf. One in the ventilation, grate overlooking the kitchen. One facing the driveway, hidden in the birdhouse. Not just for security, for the audience. I hoped to never need a judge. By Thursday afternoon, the nice act began to crumble. Deadline, 24 hours. They still didn't have the tax binders, the safe combination, or the feeling that I was truly packing. Elaine called me at 2 p.m. Her voice had lost the sing-song quality of the lasagna dinner. Piper, she said, no greeting. I'm sending a list of items you need to leave behind. The movers need to know what to wrap and what to trash. Okay, I said. And listen, she said, her voice dropping. We need to talk about the car. Dad says the title for the sedan is in Walter's name. You can't drive it off the property on Friday. It's part of the estate assets. They were going to strand me, kick me out of the house and take the car, so I'd have to walk down the highway with my suitcases. I understand, I said. I'll leave the keys on the counter. Good, she said. We just want this to be clean. Don't make it hard, Piper. We're all tired. I'm tired too, Mom, I said honestly. We'll be there tomorrow at 5 sharp, she said. Make sure the driveway is clear for the truck. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in the silence of the house, looking at the car keys on the table. The sedan was in Walter's name, but what they didn't know, because they hadn't asked, was that Walter had transferred the title to the trust along with the house. The car wasn't theirs. It was mine to manage. But I would leave it in the garage. Let them think they had grounded me. The sun began to set. The house groaned as the temperature dropped, timbers contracting. A sound I'd miss if I ever actually left. But I wasn't leaving. I was sitting on the floor of the empty living room. I'd moved all my personal furniture into the locked master suite to stage the move-out appearance when my phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. Not a question. A command. Tessa, we are coming early tomorrow. Noon. Bringing the notary and the final release forms. Don't leave until you sign. Talking in person is easier. Noon. They were moving the timeline up. Anxious. Maybe they realized the online filing hadn't processed instantly. Or maybe they just wanted to catch me off guard. Bringing a notary to force a signature. They were going to corner me, pen in hand, use sheer weight to bully me into signing away my rights. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I didn't need to reply. I stood up, walked to the front door, looked at the keypad. I punched in the sequence that took the lock out of dummy mode and into fortress mode. Beep beep. Or click. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. Let them come at noon. Let them bring their notary. Let them bring their fake smiles and their lasagna dishes and their greed. I wasn't going to be the daughter who served tea and apologized for taking up space. Tomorrow, for the first time in 28 years, I was going to be the one who opened the door. Or, more accurately, the one who decided if it opened at all. The Friday morning sky over Harbor Hollow wasn't just gray. It was the color of a bruised lung. The fog had rolled in overnight, thick and suffocating, erasing the horizon line. It was the kind of weather that made sounds travel too far. The snap of a twig, the cry of a heron, the crunch of tires on gravel. I was standing in the foyer, watching the driveway monitor hidden in the bookshelf. It was exactly noon. They were punctual. When it came to taking things that didn't belong to them, the young family operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. The black SUV emerged from the mist like a shark surfacing. It didn't park in the designated guest spot. It pulled right up to the front steps, tires crushing the edge of the lawn. This was no longer a visit. This was an occupation. I watched them get out. They didn't move like a family coming to visit. They moved like a board of directors arriving for a hostile takeover. Close together, shoulder to shoulder, a unified front of beige trench coats and grim determination. They had rehearsed this. I saw it in the way Elaine adjusted Grant's collar, the way Tessa checked her reflection in the car window. I opened the front door before they could ring the bell. I wanted to control the threshold. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind me. I heard the soft, electronic click of the biometric lock engaging. They didn't hear it. They were too busy looking at me. "Morning," I said. My voice was flat, carried away by the damp wind. They didn't say hello. Tessa stepped forward, the tip of the spear. In her hand, a sheath of papers clipped with a heavy metal binder clip. The top page thick, official-looking, with a stamp that looked impressively legal to the untrained eye. "It's done," Tessa said, her voice trembling slightly, not with fear, but the adrenaline of victory. "The transfer is recorded. The house is in my name, Piper. Legally." She thrust the papers toward me, but didn't let go. Held them out like a shield. I didn't need to read them. The printout from the online service. A generated deed with a pending submission stamp. To her, it looked like ownership. To me, it looked like evidence of fraud. "You filed it," I said. "We had to," Grant interjected, standing slightly behind Tessa, arms crossed, looking everywhere but my eyes. "We couldn't wait for you to drag your feet anymore, Piper. We have a responsibility to this family's assets." "Assets," I repeated. "Don't look at us like that," Elaine said, her voice soft, that terrifyingly gentle tone. She stepped beside Tessa, looked at me with pity. "This isn't personal, honey. You know that, right? We love you, but you're stuck here. We're freeing you." "Freeing me," I said. "You have a life in the city," Grant said, his voice gaining strength, gesturing vaguely toward the driveway. "You have your little apartment. Your friends. You don't belong in a place like this. It's too big. Too old. It requires capital you simply don't have." Tessa waved the papers. A sharp snapping sound. "The point is," Tessa said, her eyes hard, "it's over. The deed is filed. I am the owner of record as of this morning, so I'm not asking you any more, Piper. I'm telling you." She took a breath, puffing up her chest. "You need to be out. The trucks are coming." I looked at her, at the way she stood, legs apart, claiming the porch my grandfather built. At the triumphant smirk she couldn't quite suppress. She thought she had won. She thought that piece of paper was a magic spell that erased my existence. I could have screamed, told them their filing was invalid, that the trust predated their claim, that they were committing a felony. But Miles' voice was in my head. Let them overplay their hand. So I did the only thing that would make them feel truly safe. I surrendered. I let my shoulders slump, let my face fall, looked down at my boots, then back up at the house, letting my eyes water just enough to look defeated. "Okay," I whispered. The word hung in the damp air. Tessa blinked. She'd expected a fight, prepared a speech about lawsuits and competency hearings. My submission threw her off balance. "Okay," she asked, suspicious. "You're right," I said, lifting my hands in helplessness. "I can't fight you. I don't have the money for a lawyer. And if the papers are signed, then they're signed." I saw the tension drain from Grant's body. He let out a long, loud exhale. "Thank God," he said. "Thank God you're finally seeing reason, Piper. This is for the best. You'll see." Elaine rushed forward, hugged me. A stiff, awkward hug. She smelled of expensive perfume and betrayal. "I'm so proud of you," she murmured into my ear. "You're doing the right thing. We'll make sure you get a little something from the estate later to help with your rent." A little something. Rent. I pulled away gently. "When are the movers coming?" Tessa checked her watch, back in command. I had to reschedule the big truck because of the weather forecast for tomorrow. "They're coming in 48 hours. Sunday morning. 8 o'clock sharp." 48 hours, I said. "Yes," Tessa said. "So that gives you 2 more days to get your personal things out. Anything left in the house on Sunday morning becomes property of the new owner. That's standard legal procedure." It wasn't standard legal procedure. It was theft. But I nodded. "I understand. We'll be back then to supervise the load-in," Tessa said. She tucked the papers back into her bag, patting it affectionately. "I want to do a final walkthrough on Sunday before the crew starts. Mark which walls are coming down." "Okay," I said again. "Well," Grant said, rubbing his hands together. "That went better than expected. Let's go get lunch. We should celebrate." He looked at me for a second. I thought he might invite me. "You should get packing," he said. "I will," I said. "Bye, sweetie." Elaine called out, already walking toward the car. "Don't work too hard." I stood on the porch and watched them leave. Watched them climb back into the black SUV. Watched Tessa laughing at something Grant said. Watched them back out, confident they had crushed the rebellion without firing a single shot. They thought the silence from the house was the silence of an empty room. They didn't know it was the silence of a held breath. As soon as their taillights vanished into the fog, I turned. My thumb on the scanner. The lock chirped a happy mechanical sound, and the deadbolt slid back. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of holding back the truth. I walked into the kitchen, footsteps echoing. I went to the drawer where I kept the everyday silverware, not the fancy silver Elaine was worried about. Underneath a plastic tray, a hidden compartment. Inside, a single envelope, handwritten, to Piper, for when the storm comes. Walter's handwriting. I'd read it a dozen times, but I needed to read it again, to wash the taste of their fake kindness out of my mouth. I opened the letter. My dearest Piper, if you are reading this, then my fears were justified. They have come for the house. They have come for the money. They have told you that you are not enough. I want you to remember something. This house is not made of wood and stone. It is made of the days we spent here. It is made of the safety we built when the world was too loud. Your parents and your sister. They confuse value with price. They think ownership is about a piece of paper. But ownership is about care. You are the only one who ever cared. Do not let them write the end of the story. I built the foundation. But you are the one who has to hold the roof up. Do not apologize for protecting what is yours. Love, Grandpa. I folded the letter. A tear slid down my cheek, hot and angry. I won't let them, I whispered to the empty room. I promise. I took a deep breath. The time for sentiment was over. The time for action had arrived. I pulled out my phone, opened the encrypted chat with Miles. I typed 3 sentences. They were just here. They claimed ownership based on a fraudulent filing. They are returning in 48 hours with a moving crew. I hit send. Then I opened the contact for the witness the process server Miles had arranged. I sent a pin of my location. Sunday, 0800 hours. Be ready. I walked back to the front door. Through the frosted glass, I could see the gray outline of the driveway where their car had been. They had given me 48 hours to vacate. They thought they were being generous. They thought they were giving me time to retreat. They were wrong. They had given me 48 hours to dig the trench deeper. I placed my hand on the cold brass of the doorknob. Come back on Sunday, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Bring your trucks. Bring your papers. Bring your arrogance. I twisted the deadbolt, feeling the solid steel engage with the frame. It was a heavy, final sound. But this door, I said to the ghosts of my family, is not going to open the way you think it is. I walked away from the door, heading toward the basement. I had a lot of work to do before Sunday. If they wanted a show, I was going to give them one. But the script they were following had been rewritten. And they had no idea they were walking onto a stage where the trap door was already unlatched. Sunday morning arrived, not with the warmth of the sun, but with the hydraulic hiss of air brakes. I was sitting in the foyer, drinking coffee from a travel mug, when the house shook. A subtle vibration, rattling the window panes, just enough to disturb the dust motes dancing in the light. I checked the monitor hidden in the bookshelf. A massive moving truck, bright yellow, was backing up the driveway, taking up the entire width of the road. Behind it, the black SUV followed like a commander's vehicle inspecting the front lines. It was exactly 8 a.m. I stood up, smoothed down my jeans, checked my reflection. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who was done waiting. Beside me, standing in the shadows of the living room archway, was Mr. Arthur Vance. He looked like he'd been born in a filing cabinet, wearing a gray suit slightly too large, holding a thick, leather-bound folder. A senior process server and notary for the county, a man Miles had worked with for 30 years. He had the personality of a concrete block, which was exactly what I needed. They're here, I said. Vance checked his watch. Right on schedule. Let's proceed. I unlocked the deadbolt, the manual one, which I had disengaged 10 minutes ago to allow us to exit smoothly. Outside, car door slammed. Tessa's voice, high and piercing, cut through the morning air. Just back it up to the porch, she was shouting. We want to load the big furniture first. The piano goes. The sideboard goes. Vance's voice added. Careful with the suspension. That driveway hasn't been paved in 10 years. I opened the door. The moving truck's engine was deafening. 2 men in blue jumpsuits were already pulling the metal ramp from the back. They looked bored, tired, ready to heave heavy objects. Tessa stood at the bottom of the porch steps, holding a clipboard. She looked up, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. Good morning, she called out, though her eyes were cold. We're starting early. We want to be done before noon, so the guys can beat the traffic back to the city. Elaine stood by the hydrangeas, holding a coffee cup. Piper, make sure your boxes are separated. We don't want to accidentally load your personal items onto the truck going to storage. Grant was already walking toward the movers, pointing at the front door. Start with the living room. There's a leather armchair. Stop, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Grant ignored me. And a grandfather clock. Pat them well. I said stop. I said louder this time. Tessa rolled her eyes, marched up the steps. Piper, don't start. We talked about this. It's moving day. Don't make it dramatic. She reached for the door handle, intending to breeze past me. I stepped sideways, blocking the entrance. As I moved, Mr. Vance stepped out from behind me. The effect was instantaneous. Tessa stopped mid-step, her hand hovering inches from the door. Grant froze near the truck. Elaine lowered her coffee cup. They were expecting a crying daughter. Not a 60-year-old man with a badge on his belt and a folder that looked like a legal weapon. Who is this? Tessa demanded, her tone shifting from arrogance to annoyance. Is this your boyfriend, Piper? Seriously. Mr. Vance didn't smile. Didn't blink. He opened his folder, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. Are you Tessa Marie Young? He asked, his voice dry, devoid of emotion. The voice of a state. Tessa frowned. Yes. Who are you? Vance ignored her. He looked past her to the driveway. And you are Grant Edward Young and Elaine Susan Young? I am Grant Young, my father said, walking toward the porch, chest puffed out. I am the executive of this estate. Who the hell are you and why are you blocking my movers? Vance looked at the movers. Gentlemen, I would advise you to halt operations immediately. You are currently trespassing on private property involved in an active legal dispute. The two movers looked at each other. The taller one shrugged, dropped the end of the ramp with a loud clang, and leaned against the truck. They knew the drill. If the suits were arguing, the clock was ticking, but the lifting stopped. Dispute. Grant laughed, a harsh barking sound. There is no dispute. Show him the papers, Tessa. Tessa whipped out her file, the same one she'd waved at me on Friday. I have the deed right here. I am the owner of record. I filed it electronically on Wednesday. This house is mine. This man, she pointed a manicured finger at Vance, is trespassing. Piper, get out of the way. Vance looked at the paper in her hand. He didn't take it, just glanced at it, with the look of a jeweler spotting a piece of glass in a display of diamonds. That document, Vance said calmly, is invalid. Excuse me, Tessa screeched. It has the county stamp. It has an automated provisional receipt stamp, Vance corrected her. It was flagged 48 hours ago by the clerk's office for a fatal title conflict. He pulled a document from his own folder. Thick, bound in blue paper, bearing a raised gold seal. This, Vance announced, is the certified deed of trust for the Walter and June Young Irrevocable Trust. It was executed and recorded 3 weeks ago, immediately following the death of Mr. Walter Young. It predates your filing. He looked at the group, his eyes hard. The sole trustee and legal beneficiary with lifetime rights of residency is Ms. Piper Young. She is the only person with the authority to authorize entry or removal of assets. Silence slammed into the porch, heavier than the truck. Elaine's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Grant looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Tessa shook her head, her face blotchy red. That's a lie. That's impossible. Grandfather left everything to Mom and Dad. We have the will. The will from 2015, Vance said, flipping a page. That will was superseded by the creation of the trust. Assets placed in an irrevocable trust are no longer part of the probate estate. Your parents have no authority here. Neither do you. You're lying. Tessa shouted, turning to the movers. Load the truck. I'm paying you. Ignore him. The movers didn't move. The tall one lit a cigarette. Sorry, lady. We don't touch domestic disputes. Company policy. Call us when the cops sort it out. I will call the cops. Tessa screamed, fumbling for her phone. Please do, Vance said. I have the trespass warnings prepared right here. Grant stomped up the stairs, face purple. He got right in Vance's face. Now listen here, you bureaucrat. You can't just wave a piece of paper and steal my inheritance. My father built this house. I grew up here. And you are attempting to loot it. Vance didn't back down an inch. I am here as an officer of the court to witness the condition of the property. Any attempt to force entry will be recorded as breaking and entering. Any attempt to remove items will be recorded as grand larceny. Grant looked at me for the first time. Really looked at me. He didn't see the daughter he could bully. He saw the wall I had built. Piper, he growled. What did you do? I stepped forward, moving in front of Vance. I looked my father in the eye. I did what Grandpa told me to do, I said. I protected the house. You went behind our backs. Elaine wailed, starting to cry. Not the soft, sympathetic crying from funerals. The ugly, panicked crying of someone watching $1 million evaporate. We're family. How could you do this to your sister? She needs this place. She doesn't need it, I said calmly. She wants to sell it. She wants to flip it. I heard you, Mom. I heard all of you. We were doing what was best for everyone. Elaine sobbed. Why are you being so cruel? Why are you humiliating us like this? Humiliating you. I tilted my head. You showed up with a moving truck to throw me onto the street. You forged a deed. You tried to steal the car. You lied to my face for 3 weeks. I pointed at the yellow truck. Family doesn't bring a demolition crew to dinner, Mom. Family doesn't give you 48 hours to vacate your own home. Tessa was frantically scrolling on her phone, presumably checking the status of her online filing. She stopped, Her face went pale. She had found it. The rejection notice. The title clouded. Alert she had ignored because she was too arrogant to check her spam folder. She looked up at me, and the venom in her eyes was toxic. You trapped us, she hissed. You let us file that. You knew. I let you show me who you really are, I said. I turned to the movers, who were watching the show with mild interest. Gentlemen, I called out. There is no move happening today. You can send the cancellation fee bill to Ms. Tessa Young. She is the one who booked you. The tall mover nodded, flicked his cigarette onto the driveway. I'd pick it up later, and signaled his partner. Pack it up, boys. We're rolling. The sound of the ramp sliding back into the truck was the sound of a gavel coming down. Clang. Grant watched the truck engine rev. He looked at the papers in Vance's hand. He looked at the biometric lock on the door. He realized, finally, that the physical force he relied on was gone. He turned back to me. His face wasn't purple anymore. It was gray. Cold. Terrifyingly calm. You think you're smart, Grant said, his voice low, like a snake sliding through dry grass. You think because you got a lawyer and signed some papers, you have won. The law says I have, I said. The law. Grant spat on the porch step. We raised you. We paid for your school. We carried you. And now you're trying to bury me. I said, please leave. Mr. Vance is recording the time. Grant laughed. Dry, humorless. He stepped closer, leaning in so only I could hear him, ignoring Vance. You can keep the house, Piper, he whispered. Keep the wood, keep the stone. Rot in here with the memories for all I care. He smiled, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. But you forgot one thing. You were so busy locking down the real estate. You forgot about the rest of the life you left in the city. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? The storage unit, Grant said softly. The one near your university apartment. The one you put all your research in. Your master's thesis data, the hard drives, the art portfolio. I froze. I had rented a unit to store my things while I was here. The lease was up for renewal last week, Grant said, his eyes gleaming with malice. The reminder went to the family mailing address. I didn't pay it. He paused, savoring the look on my face. In fact, he continued, I canceled it. And since I was the guarantor on the original contract from when you were a student, I authorized them to clear it out, auction it off. Yesterday, he stepped back, straightening his coat. So enjoy your big, empty house, Piper. I hope it's worth losing everything you actually worked for. He turned to Elaine and Tessa, who stared at him in confusion. Get in the car. We're leaving. But Dad, Tessa started. I said, get in the car. Grant roared. They scrambled into the SUV. I stood on the porch, my hands trembling. The victory of saving the house suddenly felt like ash in my mouth. My research, my portfolio, 5 years of work gone. Mr. Vance stepped up beside me. Ms. Young, they are leaving. I watched the black SUV tear down the driveway, following the retreating moving truck. He's lying, I whispered, trying to convince myself. He has to be lying. But as I looked at the dust settling in the driveway, I remembered how Grant played the game. He never bluffed. If he said he burned a bridge, he didn't just burn it. He blew it up while you were still standing on it. I had won the battle for Harbor Hollow, but Grant had just told me that he had nuked my future to do it. The yellow moving truck had been gone for 24 hours, but the dust it kicked up hadn't settled. It had just changed forms. Monday morning didn't bring peace. It brought a courier. He arrived at 10 a.m., driving a nondescript white sedan. He walked to the gate I had locked the night before, buzzed the intercom. I walked down the driveway to meet him. Piper Young, he asked. Yes. He handed me a thick envelope. Not from the family. From a law firm. Sterling, Holloway and Associates. I knew the name. Aggressive corporate litigators. The kind of firm you hired when you wanted to scorch the earth, so nothing would ever grow there again. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like holding a brick. You have been served, the man said and drove away. I didn't open it until I was back inside the kitchen. Biometric locks engaged, security cameras recording. My hands were steady, but my heart hammered a frantic rhythm. I sliced open the seal. I expected a lawsuit contesting the validity of the trust. I expected them to claim the signature was forged, or the date was wrong. I was wrong. They weren't attacking the paper. They were attacking the person holding it. The header read, Petition for removal of trustee and emergency appointment of guardian ad litem. I scanned the legal jargon, my stomach twisting into a cold, hard knot. They were filing a motion to have me removed as trustee of the Walter and June Young Irrevocable Trust. Their grounds: lack of capacity, undue influence, financial mismanagement. I read the affidavit. It was signed by Elaine Young. Petitioner states that the respondent, Piper Young, has a history of emotional instability and isolation. Petitioner asserts that the respondent took advantage of the decedent's diminished mental state while isolating him from the rest of the family to coerce the execution of trust documents. Furthermore, the respondent is currently unemployed and lacks the financial literacy required to manage an estate of this magnitude. I had to put the paper down on the counter. I thought I might tear it in half. They were painting a picture of me as a predator, a confused, unstable girl who whispered poison into a dying man's ear while locking his loving family out. It was a rewrite of history, so audacious it took my breath away. I picked up my phone to call Miles, but the screen lit up before I could dial. A text from my cousin Sarah in Ohio. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but we used to be close. Sarah, Piper, is it true? Anna Lane just called me. She said you're planning to sell the Harbor Hollow house to a condo developer and that you wouldn't let them in to get Grandpa's journals. I stared at the screen. So that was the narrative. They weren't just fighting me in court. They were poisoning the water in the family pond. They knew the extended family cherished this house. By telling everyone I was selling to a developer, a lie so specific it had to be calculated, they were turning the entire Young clan against me. Me. Sarah, that is a lie. I am keeping the house. They are the ones who wanted to flip it. Sarah, that is not what Tessa said. She posted a long thing on Facebook about how heartbroken she is that greed has destroyed the family legacy. Piper, people are really upset. I didn't reply. I couldn't fight a social media war. I had to fight a legal one. I called Miles. I have the letter, I said as soon as he picked up. I have a copy too, Miles said, his voice grim. They're playing dirty, Piper. This is the nuclear option. Challenging a trust is hard, so they're trying to destroy your character instead. If they can prove you're incompetent or that you manipulated Walter, a judge could strip you of the trusteeship and appoint, guess who? Grant. Or a neutral third party who would eventually liquidate the assets to pay for the legal fees incurred by the dispute. Grant told me he canceled my storage unit. I said, my voice shaking with sudden rage. He told me he authorized them to auction my master's thesis, my portfolio, everything. Did you check? Miles asked sharply. I called this morning, I said. He did try. He called the facility on Saturday pretending to be me, claiming I lost my key and wanted to terminate the lease. But because the account has a 2-step verification passcode, my mother's maiden name, which he guessed wrong, they flagged it. My stuff is safe. But the attempt, Miles, he tried to erase my professional life. Good, Miles said. Good. It proves malice. A loving father doesn't try to auction his daughter's education 2 days after a funeral. We'll subpoena the call logs from the storage facility. Add it to the pile. They're trying to say I'm incompetent, I said. How do I prove I'm not? By being the most competent person in the room, Miles said. They're going to try to provoke you. They want you to send angry texts. They want you to scream in public. They want to show the judge a hysterical woman. Do not give them that. I hung up. I felt like the walls of the house were closing in. I walked into the living room, where yesterday Mr. Vance had stood like a shield. Now the threat felt ghostlier. My phone pinged again. An email alert. Security warning. Multiple failed login attempts detected for account Harbor Hollow Utilities. I clicked the link. Someone had tried to access the electric and water accounts 5 times in the last hour. The IP address was local. They were trying to get into the utility accounts. Why? Then it hit me. If they could log in, they could cancel the autopay, turn off the lights, stop the heating oil delivery, and then in court, present the shut-off notices as proof that I was failing to maintain the asset. I immediately logged in, changed the passwords to a random string of 30 characters, and set up a hardware security key requirement. Nice try, Tessa, I whispered. Then came the good cop routine. My phone buzzed with a message from Elaine. Elaine, Piper, please. This has gone too far. Dad is furious. He wants to drag this out for years. I don't want to see your name dragged through the mud in court. The lawyers are talking about requesting your medical records. About that time you saw the therapist in college. I froze. I had seen a counselor for anxiety during my sophomore year finals. It was normal. Healthy. But Elaine was weaponizing it. Threatening to air my private medical history in a public hearing to paint me as unstable. Elaine, Piper, just sign a settlement. We can split the house 3 ways. We'll drop the lawsuit. No one needs to know about your episodes. I can protect your reputation. Please, honey, let me be your mom. The audacity was breathtaking. She was holding the gun and promising to save me from the bullet if I just handed over the wallet. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, saved it to the evidence folder. I needed air. I needed to think. I walked into Grandpa's study. The room still smelled of his pipe tobacco and old leather. I sat in his chair, the same one Grant had tried to claim. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one where he kept his thinking tapes. Walter used to record his thoughts on a dictaphone. He said his hand shook too much to write in the evenings, so he spoke to the machine. I had listened to most of them, but there was one small cassette in a case labeled just in case. I had found it a week ago, but hadn't had the courage to play it. It felt too final. But now, with their accusations of undue influence ringing in my ears, I needed to hear him. I put the tape into the player and pressed play. The magnetic tape hissed for a moment, and then Walter's voice filled the room. Weak, breathless, but the mind behind it was sharp as a tack. It is March 3rd. I am recording this because I know my son. I closed my eyes. Grant was here today. Walter's voice continued. He brought papers. He wanted power of attorney. He told me I was confused. He told me I was forgetting things. I told him the only thing I have forgotten is why I lent him that money in '99. A dry, raspy chuckle. I am not confused. I am dying. There is a difference. But they will try to say I didn't know what I was doing when I gave the house to Piper. They will say she tricked me. They will say she is weak. The tape hissed again. Piper, if you are listening to this, it means they have started the mudslinging. It means they are attacking your character because they can't attack your rights. Listen to me closely. In the blue binder, under the insurance policies, there is a log. I kept a log of every time they visited in the last 5 years. Dates, times, duration. I sat up straight. A log. You will see the pattern, Walter said. They visited 20 times in 5 years. You visited 300 times. You didn't influence me, Piper. You were just the only one who showed up. That is not manipulation. That is love. Take the log. Show the judge. Let them argue with the calendar. The tape clicked off. I scrambled to the bookshelf, found the blue binder. I'd looked through it before, but missed the thin black notebook tucked into the back pocket. I opened it. Exactly as he said. Walter, with his meticulous carpenter's brain, had recorded every interaction. December 24th, 2022. Grant and Elaine arrived 2 p.m. Left 4:15 p.m. Complained about heating cost. Did not ask about June's chemo. January 15th, 2023. Piper arrived, stayed weekend, fixed back step, cooked soup. February 10th, 2023. Tessa called, asked for loan, 10 minutes. Page after page. A concrete, irrefutable timeline of neglect versus care. This wasn't just a diary. It was a ledger of emotional bankruptcy. Undue influence. I whispered, tracing the entries. I didn't influence him. You ignored him. I took photos of the log, scanned the pages, uploaded them to the secure server. Then I called Miles. I have something, I said. A log book, written in Walter's hand. Documents every visit for 5 years. It proves they were absent, and I was the primary caregiver. It proves he was lucid enough to track their neglect. That is excellent, Miles said, excitement in his voice. That goes to the state of mind. It destroys the isolation narrative. If they claim you isolated him, we show the log proving they simply chose not to come. I'm ready, I said. When do we fight this? I just got off the phone with their counsel, Miles said. They're pushing for an emergency injunction. They want a hearing this Thursday. Want to freeze the trust assets immediately. Thursday, I said. 3 days. They're betting you'll fold before then, Miles warned. They're betting the threat of the courtroom will make you sign the settlement Elaine sent. They think you're too scared to stand up in front of a judge and speak. I looked at the camera feed on my monitor. The driveway was empty. The house was quiet. But inside, the evidence was screaming. I thought about the storage unit they tried to auction. The mental instability lies. The way they looked at me on the porch, like I was a bug to be crushed. Let them bet, I said. Piper, this will be ugly, Miles said softly. They will say terrible things about you on the record. Things you can't unhear. I've been hearing them my whole life, Miles, I said. They just usually whisper them in the kitchen. I prefer they say them into a microphone where I can rebut them. Okay, Miles said. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, County Superior Court. Or something boring. I hung up, walked to the window. The fog was lifting off Harbor Hollow. The view was clear now. The gray water looked like steel. They wanted to paint me as the fragile, crazy daughter who stole a fortune. They wanted to make me the villain of the story. Fine. If they wanted a villain, I would show them what a villain looked like. A villain was someone who kept the receipts. A villain was someone who didn't cry when you threatened them. A villain was someone who walked into court, not with a plea for mercy, but with a logbook of their sins. I went to the closet and pulled out my suit. Navy blue. Sharp. Professional. Thursday wasn't going to be a hearing. It was going to be a reckoning. The night before the hearing, the house felt like a ship holding its breath before a hurricane. I sat at the mahogany dining table, the surface covered in paper. To anyone else, it looked like a chaotic mess of receipts, screenshots, legal forms. To me, it was a map of the last 5 years. I'd printed everything. The text messages where Grant called the house a money pit, the photos of the yellow moving truck, the logbook entries from Walter's black notebook, the automated rejection letter from the county clerk regarding Tessa's fraudulent filing. My printer had been humming for 2 hours, spitting out the physical proof of my family's betrayal. I picked up a photo of Tessa on the porch, her face twisted in that ugly, triumphant sneer. I looked at it for a long time. I wasn't looking at my sister anymore. I was looking at a stranger who shared my DNA. I stood up, walked away from the table. I needed to feel the house one last time before I had to defend it. I walked through the darkened rooms, without turning on the lights. I knew the geography of this place, better than I knew the lines on my own palm. I walked into the sunroom, where the wicker furniture still held the faint scent of June's lavender perfume. I touched the cold glass of the window. I am ready, I whispered to the dark. But was I? I walked back to the kitchen, opened my laptop. I had one final stone to turn over. Earlier that afternoon, reviewing financial records for the trust defense, I'd stumbled upon something odd. In the shared family cloud drive, a digital storage space I'd set up for my parents 3 years ago to help them organize their taxes, there was a new folder. Labeled simply, Liquid. My parents weren't tech-savvy. They likely forgot I still had administrator access. They thought deleting me from their lives meant unfriending me on Facebook, not revoking permissions on a server I built. I clicked on the folder. Inside, 3 PDF documents, dated within the last 2 months. The first was a notice from a bank in the city. Not a statement, a notice of default. I read the numbers, and my breath hitched. Grant and Elaine were behind on the mortgage for their penthouse in the city. Not just a little behind. 6 months behind. The bank was threatening foreclosure proceedings if $850,000 wasn't brought current within 30 days. 30 days. The deadline on the notice was exactly 4 days from now. I opened the second document. A letter from a private equity firm. Grant had taken out a high-interest business loan 2 years ago. $500,000, collateralized against his future inheritance. He had borrowed money against a house he didn't own yet. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The rush to evict me. The move out by Friday deadline. The sheer, frantic aggression of their takeover. It wasn't just greed. It was panic. They weren't trying to steal the house because they wanted a summer getaway or to renovate the kitchen. They were trying to steal it because they were drowning. They needed to liquidate Harbor Hollow immediately to pay off their debts before they lost their own home and their social standing. "Oh, Dad," I whispered, staring at the screen. "You are broke." It made sense now. The fairness argument. The pressure on Tessa to get the deed. They were using Tessa as the vehicle to get the title, knowing that if Grant took it directly, his creditors might seize it immediately. By putting it in Tessa's name, they thought they could sell it quietly and funnel the cash back to cover their holes. But that led to a second question. Why was Tessa going along with it? Tessa was selfish. Yes, but she wasn't a criminal. She was risk-averse. Filing a fraudulent deed was a felony. Who pushed her to do it? I went back to the quickinheritance.com receipt I'd found in the digital trash bin. I looked at the payment details again. I'd assumed Tessa paid for it. But zooming in on the credit card receipt, the last 4 digits didn't match any card I knew Tessa possessed. And the billing name wasn't Tessa Young. It was Jay Thorne. Julian Thorne. Tessa's new fiancé, the entrepreneur she'd been dating for 6 months. The one too busy closing a deal in Dubai to come to the funeral. I opened a new tab and started digging. Background check on Julian Thorne. Not the Google search kind, but the deep dive kind using the paid database Miles had given me access to. It took 10 minutes. Julian Thorne didn't have deals in Dubai. He had a suspended real estate license in Florida. 2 civil judgments against him for title washing scams, convincing people to transfer deeds to shell companies for asset protection, then leveraging the properties for loans and vanishing. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty house. Tessa wasn't the mastermind. She was the mark. This Julian guy must have whispered in her ear. Probably told her he could handle the paperwork to help her parents. Probably told her the online service was a legitimate loophole. He was setting her up to take the fall for the fraud, while he likely planned to take the proceeds from the renovation loan she mentioned earlier. Twist number 2. My family was a nesting doll of disasters. Grant and Elaine were desperate debtors trying to loot the estate to save their reputation. Tessa was a manipulated puppet about to hand the keys over to a con artist. And I was the only one standing in the way of the entire house of cards collapsing. I saved the documents. The foreclosure notice, the business loan, the background check on Julian. I had the ammunition to destroy them. If I revealed the foreclosure in court, Grant's reputation in the city would be vaporized. If I revealed Julian's record, Tessa's engagement and her heart would be shattered. I sat back, my hands trembling. My phone rang. It was Miles. "Piper," he said. It was late, almost 11 p.m. His voice sounded weary. "I just got off the phone with their lawyer again. And they're offering a settlement," Miles said. "A new one, better terms. They've dropped the incompetent suit. You keep the house, but you agree to take out a mortgage on the property for $500,000 and pay it to them as a settlement of claims. In exchange, they walk away, $500,000. Exactly the amount of Grant's business loan. They're desperate, Miles," I said. "I found out why. They're facing foreclosure. Grant borrowed against the inheritance." Miles was silent for a long moment. "I see. That explains the urgency and the aggression. What should I? If you accept," Miles said slowly, "the fighting stops. You keep the house, though it will be burdened with debt. But the family war ends. If we go into that courtroom tomorrow, Piper, if you use what you just found, you aren't just winning a case. You are nuking their lives." I looked at the darkness outside the window. "If I pay them," I said, "I am validating them. I am telling them that it's okay to bully me as long as they send a bill first. I am telling them that grandfather's wishes can be bought for $500,000. It's the path of least resistance," Miles reminded me. "No," I said. "Grandpa said, Don't let them write the story. If I pay them, they write the story that I was scared, that I was guilty, that I owed them. So we proceed. We proceed, I said. But Miles, I'm not going to use the foreclosure documents. Not yet. Why not? It's the kill shot. Because, I said, surprising myself. I don't need to destroy them to save the house. I just need to tell the truth. I'll keep the documents in my back pocket. If they lie on the stand, if they push me too far, then I will use them. But not before. You're more merciful than they are, Miles said. No, I said. I just don't want to be them. Yielding once is opening the door forever. Miles, I'm keeping the door shut. We hung up. The house was completely silent now. Midnight. I set up my phone on the kitchen counter. I hit record. I didn't plan to post this. I didn't plan to show it to the judge. I just needed to say it out loud, to make it real. My name is Piper Young. I told the camera lens. It's the night before the hearing. My parents are trying to declare me incompetent. My sister has accused me of theft. Tomorrow, I have to walk into a room and prove that I am a person worthy of trust. I took a shaky breath. I found out tonight that they are ruining themselves. They are broke. They are being scammed. Part of me wants to save them. Part of me wants to write them a check and make the scary yellow truck go away. But I can't, because this house isn't an ATM. It is a sanctuary, and you don't burn down a sanctuary to pay for a mistake. I stopped the recording. Saved it. Evidence of sanity. My phone buzzed again. A text from Grant. He was awake, too. Probably drinking scotch, staring at his foreclosure notice. Grant, last chance, Piper. The lawyers are ready to tear you apart tomorrow. We will bring up everything. The therapy, the grades, the time you got fired from the coffee shop. Do you really want the whole town to know you're crazy? Drop the trust. Sign the settlement, or you lose this family forever. I stared at the words. You lose this family forever. He thought that was a threat. He didn't realize that I had already lost them the day they chose money over me. He was threatening to take away something that no longer existed. I typed my reply. My fingers were steady. Me. Family isn't a price to buy silence, Dad. And I am not buying. I sent it. I turned off the kitchen light. Was about to go upstairs to try to sleep for a few hours when my phone rang. I frowned. It wasn't Miles. It wasn't Grant. It was a number I didn't recognize. A local area code, but not a contact I had saved. It was 12:15 in the morning. I hesitated, then swiped answer. Hello, Miss Piper Young. The voice was male, deep, official. Not a lawyer. Not a family member. Yes, this is she. This is Detective Miller from the County Fraud Investigation Unit. I apologize for the late hour, but we received a flag from the clerk's office regarding a property filing at your address. My heart stopped. Had Tessa called them? Had she tried to frame me? Yes, there is a dispute, I stammered. We have a hearing tomorrow. We know, the detective said. We have been monitoring the activity on that deed submission. We traced the IP address and the payment method. It triggered an alert in our system for a known pattern of elder abuse and title fraud. He paused. We will be at the hearing tomorrow, Miss Young. Not as observers. We have questions for a Mr. Julian Thorne, and we need to know if you are prepared to testify regarding your sister's involvement. I gripped the phone. My sister. We need to know if she is a victim or an accomplice, the detective said. See you in court, Miss Young. The line went dead. I stood in the darkness, the silence of the house pressing against my ears. I had prepared for a civil battle about trusts and wills. I had prepared to defend my sanity. I wasn't prepared for a criminal investigation. Tomorrow wasn't just going to be a hearing. It was going to be an ambush. And I was the only one who knew the police were coming. County Superior Court, Courtroom 4B. It smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Miles, my hands folded in my lap, resting on the navy blue fabric of my suit. Across the aisle, my family sat in a row. They looked impeccable. Elaine wore a soft gray dress that made her look fragile and maternal. Grant wore his best charcoal suit, the one he used for closing investors. Tessa was dressed in white, a calculated choice to suggest innocence, her hair pulled back in a severe, respectful bun. They looked like the victims of a great tragedy. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who possessed a voice like oiled gravel, was halfway through his opening statement. Your Honor, Sterling said, gesturing toward me with a pitying open hand. We are not here to vilify Ms. Young. We are here to help her. We have a young woman, merely 28, overwhelmed by grief, isolated in a decaying estate, making irrational decisions that jeopardize the legacy of her late grandparents. She has locked out her loving parents. She has refused reasonable communication. She is hoarding an asset she has neither the funds nor the mental stability to maintain. He paused for effect, looking at the judge. The family simply asks for the appointment of a guardian ad litem to oversee the trust and for Mr. Grant Young to be reinstated as the executive of the property to prevent financial ruin. Elaine dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A masterclass in performance. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked at Miles. Counsel Miles stood up. He didn't have Sterling's oily charm. He had the weight of granite. He walked to the podium, placing a single thin file on the stand. Your Honor, Miles said, the defense will not rely on emotional appeals. We will rely on the timeline. He turned to look at my family. Grant didn't blink. Tessa stared at the table. The petitioner claims Ms. Young is irrational and isolated, Miles continued. Yet we have submitted into evidence Exhibit A, a logbook maintained by the late Walter Young. Miles held up the black notebook. This log documents that in the last 5 years, the petitioners visited the deceased a total of 22 times. The respondent, Ms. Young, was present for 314 days. The claim of isolation is contradicted by the decedent's own hand. Piper didn't keep them away. They simply didn't care to visit until there was a will to read. Grant's jaw tightened. Furthermore, Miles said, picking up a photograph, they claim concern for the property. Exhibit B. He projected the image onto the court screen. It was the photo of the yellow moving truck blocking the driveway, with Grant and Tessa standing in the foreground, looking aggressive. This photo was taken 48 hours ago, Miles said. On a Sunday morning, the petitioners arrived with a commercial moving crew to forcibly empty the house. This was not a welfare check. This was a raid. Sterling jumped up. Objection. My clients were merely securing assets for safekeeping. Overruled, the judge said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the photo. Continue. Miles nodded. But the crux of this matter, Your Honor, is not about moving trucks. It is about fraud. The air in the room changed. From tense to vacuum-sealed, Miles picked up the document Tessa had waved in my face on the porch. The printout of the electronic deed filing. The petitioners claim that the trust is invalid and that they are the rightful owners, Miles said. To support this, Ms. Tessa Young attempted to file a quitclaim deed last Wednesday, transferring the property to herself. Miles turned to Tessa. She looked pale. Ms. Young, Miles asked directly, though he was addressing the judge, did you verify the title before you filed this deed? Sterling interjected. My client used a third-party service. She is not a lawyer. If there was a clerical error, it was unintentional. It was not a clerical error, Miles said, his voice dropping, becoming dangerously quiet. It was a crime. He produced the receipt I had found, the one with the name J. Thorne. We have here the receipt for the service, quickinheritance.com. It was paid for by a credit card belonging to a Mr. Julian Thorne, a man with 2 prior civil judgments for title fraud. Tessa gasped. A small, sharp sound like a balloon popping. She looked at Grant. Grant looked straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact with her. And, Miles continued, delivering the blow I had held back until this moment, we have the email thread between Miss Tessa Young and Mr. Thorne, recovered from the family's shared cloud drive. He held up a sheet of paper. In this email, dated 4 days ago, Ms. Young writes, the trust is a problem. We need to override it before the county updates the registry. Can we backdate the deed? The silence in the courtroom was absolute, to which Mr. Thorne replied, Miles read, we will file it as a correction. It might get flagged, but it will buy you enough time to get into the house. Miles dropped the paper on the table. It made a loud slap. They knew the trust was valid, Your Honor. They tried to bury it with a fraudulent filing to physically seize the house before this hearing could take place. The judge turned her gaze to the defense table. It wasn't a judicial look anymore. It was the look of a predator spotting prey. Ms. Young, the judge said to Tessa, is this email authentic? Tessa started to shake. She looked at Julian Thorne's name on the evidence list. She looked at the detective sitting in the back row, Detective Miller, who offered a small, grim nod. I didn't know, Tessa stammered. Julian said it was standard procedure. He said we just needed to clean up the paperwork. You asked to backdate a legal document, the judge said coldly. That is not standard procedure. That is forgery. Grant slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She was trying to save the house. Grant shouted, losing his composure completely. He stood up, his face flushing a deep, dangerous red. You don't understand. We have obligations. We have liquidity issues. Sterling tried to pull him down. Mr. Young, sit down. No. Grant roared, shaking him off. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She is sitting on $1 million of equity while we are drowning. We just needed her to sign the split. If she had just signed the split, none of this would have happened. Grant, stop. Elaine shrieked, grabbing his arm. But the words were out. We just needed her to sign the split. Grant froze. He realized what he had said. He realized he had just admitted on the record that the entire incompetence lawsuit was a sham designed to force a financial settlement. The judge looked at Grant. Then she looked at the foreclosure documents Miles had handed to the bailiff as a supplemental evidence packet, the documents I had found the night before, showing Grant's desperation. So, the judge said, her voice icy, this is not about your daughter's mental health. This is about your debts. Grant sank back into his chair. He looked small. The charcoal suit suddenly looked like a costume he had outgrown. Your Honor, Miles said softly, the defense rests. The judge didn't need a recess. She didn't need to consult notes. She looked at my family with unmasked disgust. The petition for removal of trustee is denied with prejudice, she ruled. The trust stands. Miss Piper Young is the sole legal authority over the Harbor Hollow estate. She turned her eyes to Tessa. Regarding the fraudulent filing and the email evidence, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for immediate review. Detective Miller is present in the court, I believe. Yes, Your Honor, the detective called out from the back. Tessa put her head in her hands and began to sob. This time it wasn't a performance. It was the terrified sound of a golden child realizing the safety net had been cut. And Mr. Grant Young, the judge continued, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. You are barred from coming within 500 feet of the property or Miss Piper Young. If you attempt to access the utilities, the accounts, or the premises again, you will be held in contempt and incarcerated. She banged her gavel. Bang. Court is adjourned. Piper now back in the house, perhaps looking at the family photos, then a subtle smile of peace. The gavel strike echoed in my ears long after I left that courtroom. I had won. Truly won. Harbor Hollow was safe. But the silence in the car ride home with Miles was heavy. The victory felt different than I expected. My family's world had imploded. Not because I wanted it to, but because they had built it on sand, and then tried to blame me for the tide. I protected the house, just like Grandpa wanted. I stood my ground. But standing your ground against the people who raised you leaves scars. Deep ones. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at my mother, father, or sister the same way again. That little girl who just wanted to be loved by them, she's gone. And I think, deep down, that's a different kind of loss. But this house, this sanctuary, it's mine. To heal in. To build a new life in. A life free from the expectations and manipulations of a family that valued assets over actual love. So, I've shared my story with you. It's been a whirlwind, a fight, a victory, and a heartbreak all rolled into one. I wonder, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between family and your own peace? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.